Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be answering that age-old question, are the most popular books of 2024, according to Goodreads, worth your time? Now, this is my second time doing this particular video type. I did it back in 2021, and I'm excited to be revisiting the concept in 2024, especially because Goodreads set up the list a little bit differently this year. Instead of doing just like a blanket, genre-less accumulation of most popular books, Goodreads decided to break down the books based on genre. So I have read the #1 most popular book in each of the different genres, and I'm going to walk you through all 9 of those books and tell you which ones I think are worth your time. Before we get into that though, I have to tell you about something that I absolutely hate, and that is spam texts and calls. For the past 2 weeks specifically, I have been getting the same spam call every day at around 4 p.m. And as I am someone who is like constantly on camera and editing videos, there's a pretty freaking good chance that I'm going to be getting a spam text or call in the middle of filming a video. And I know one of the reasons that I'm getting all of these spam texts and calls is because companies can't keep our data safe. Recently, AT&T revealed that nearly all of their customers' call and text data had been exposed in a massive breach. And it hasn't even been a few months since they admitted that over 70 million of their users' social security numbers ended up on the dark web. Stolen logs also contain a record of every number AT&T customers called or texted. So even if you don't use AT&T, if someone who does texted you, there's a really good chance that your number has been exposed. So what can you do to protect yourself? I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura will alert me if my phone number or any other sensitive information has been compromised. And they give me fast fraud alerts if anyone tries to use that data to access my credit or bank accounts. Aura does so much more to keep me and my family safe too. I also get things like transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus, password manager, parental controls, and identity theft insurance. I get all of this at one affordable price. I also get their AI-powered call assistant. It picks up unknown calls on my behalf, screening them for spam or scams. The AI forwards legitimate calls to me, so I don't miss appointments, deliveries, and emergencies. And it protects me from harmful text messages. It filters out spam numbers and scans links within texts for phishing threats. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/chandler.ainsley and try your first 2 weeks for free, also linked in the description down below. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now let's talk books, shall we? First up in the category of fiction, we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book is not only the most popular book on people's read shelf this year, but it also won the Goodreads Choice Award in the category of fiction last year in 2023. And for good reason. Yellowface follows the relationship between June and Athena. Athena is a literary star on the rise, while June, her peer, is struggling to get any attention in serious literary circles. After an absolutely fortuitous chain of events, Athena dies and June is just absolutely bereft, but not so depressed that she would think twice about passing off Athena's magnum opus, her unpublished manuscript, as her own. Thus begins her descent into madness, justified by her own pride and whiteness, honestly. This one is so entertaining because of the sentence level sharpness, the on-the-nose commentary about bookish spaces, combined with a pace that feels more thriller than literary. You never really feel like you're being preached to, which is something that I'm particularly sensitive to, and I think that's due in part to the fact that the satire in this book is just frankly so entertaining. And I think this book connected with me, particularly because I do review books online, and I think that this is a book that if you are online in a bookish space, you could really benefit from reading, but I do think this book truly is for everyone. And as I always do when talking about this book, I think it's important to bring up the main criticism that this book tends to get, which is that R.F. Kuang put too much of herself into this book, and it seems like she is responding to criticism under the guise of just like general commentary and satire. You know what? That might be true, but I actually think it makes the book all the more successful when an author is close to the subject matter at hand and has personal experience with what they are talking about. I gave this book 5 stars. I think it absolutely deserves to be on your want to read list and to be a part of your 2024 Goodreads reading challenge. In complete contrast to that, let's talk about some bullshit, shall we? Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus is the worst kind of historical fiction because it masquerades as this triumphant story of women's empowerment and honestly is anything but. It's about a chemist in the 60s, Elizabeth Zott, who has a single-minded passion for chemistry. She works on an all-male team at a research institute, which is kind of unheard of at the time, and of course, because of this, she is ruthlessly harassed and berated. This doesn't last for long, and after a series of events, Elizabeth is no longer working at the research institute and finds herself the star of a cooking program on TV. She's kind of reluctant to do this because she just wants to be in a lab. She doesn't necessarily want to be preaching to housewives, but she uses this opportunity to talk about the chemistry behind cooking, kind of bring some of her background to her show, and also to empower women, I guess, to find passions outside of just serving their families. And on the surface level, you know, that feels inspiring, like, oh, she's inspiring other women to like go after what they want. But so much of the story revolves around Elizabeth's love interest and his legacy. And while certainly the 60s are not a great time to be a woman, I'm just not sure that I appreciate the graphic on-page depiction of sexual assault that is really rampant in this book. Look, everyone is looking for different things when they pick up a book. It's been proven time and again that I have a hard time connecting with historical fiction. I like to see women in places of true contentment and triumph rather than being subjugated to the norms of their times. You know, perhaps this book will rock your world. I unfortunately want to throw rocks. All right, you ever pick up a book that's been hyped? I mean, you just see that bitch everywhere. Instagram, Goodreads, airport bookshops. And when you finally succumb to the pressure, you're left scratching your head. I know you've been there if you're a newbie book reader and you've been suckered into buying a Colleen Hoover paperback that's like nestled between a neck pillow and an overpriced snack box. Anyway, the mystery guest, and probably the maid as well, though I haven't read that one, they're of that ilk. The book follows Molly Gray, and if there's one thing I can agree with, it is the first sentence of the synopsis of this book on Goodreads, which reads, Molly Gray is not like anyone else. This oddball has a flair for the dramatic and kind of reminds me of a slightly more put together Amelia Bedelia. She's a maid at a fancy hotel, and at the start of the story, there is a famous mystery author who is coming to, I guess, announce something big. We don't know what that announcement is going to be, but before he can even open his mouth, he drinks some tea. And unfortunately, this tea is poisoned. Someone has murdered our author. The course of the story, the entire rest of the book, is our heroine kind of being accused of having something to do with this murder because she's a maid and, you know, she is in charge of a lot of different things at this hotel, and also trying to solve this mystery on her own. The timeline, the kind of way that the story is set up exactly, is that there is a present day plotline where Molly again is trying to solve this mystery while also trying to like not get in trouble for having murdered this man in the first place, and then also a past timeline where we're exposed to more of Molly's childhood and like how she was brought up, how she was raised. And these two plotlines do eventually intersect, which I thought was fairly clever, I guess. But the real problem with this book is that it just does not have a very satisfying mystery at its core. When you get to the end, when you figure out who done it, you're kind of like, okay. I mean, to this book's credit, it's not much of a time investment at under 300 pages, and you could definitely knock this out on a 3-hour flight. But honestly, why would you? I think almost all of the other books on this list could be found at an airport bookshop, and you'd probably have a better time. All right, I feel like Dunkaroos should sponsor me at this point, how much I'm just slamming these books. But I promise the next one we're going to talk about is a 5-star read. Not this one, but the next one. Let's talk about the most popular fantasy book, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This actually showed up on the 2021 version of this list. This was a very popular book then, and it's unfortunately a very popular book now. And I kind of understand, I guess. This is a thinly veiled inspirational novel with like the scantest bit of fantasy just to kind of like drive points home. Again, kind of wild that it showed up in the fantasy category, but I digress. 4 years ago, I read the Hope Core mess that is The Midnight Library. Nora Seed is not the name of a hallucinatory drug that you can get off of the Goop website for $600. It's the name of our main character, who at the beginning of this book is in the process of taking her own life. But instead of drifting off into the abyss, which probably would have been more satisfying to me personally, our heroine is in the Midnight Library, which is full of books, and each one contains a different version of reality, different paths that you could go down if other things had not happened in your life. So let's say in real life you broke your leg. In one of these books, there is a reality where you didn't break your leg and you became an Olympic swimmer. The problem is, if you pick up that book, there are some realities that don't match up with your present one, the one that you were living before you decided to unalive yourself. So let's say you have a really loyal and delightful dog who you love so much. In the reality where you have not broken your leg and you are an Olympic swimmer, that dog doesn't exist. And that is kind of how this book goes. It shows you that there really is no perfect life, right? There really is no reality where you get everything you want. You just need to be appreciative of what you do have, okay? You see where I'm going with this? Midnight Library is the live, laugh, lovification of fantasy, and honestly, I think that you would be better off picking up pretty much every other fantasy book that is recommended or that is most read from this list. I'll leave a link in the description to that list so you can check it out for yourself. I would honestly rather watch Hope Core on TikTok, or maybe I would rather pick up a book that talks about humanity in a slightly more interesting context, like the science fiction pick Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This book is about Ryland, and we'll forgive him his name, but he just woke up in outer space with 2 corpses, and he has no idea what the fuck is going on. Definitely in my top list of nightmare scenarios. Anyway, our man, after a while, after he gets out of this like coma-induced fugue state, he realizes he is meant to save Earth's population by solving this like complicated math equation that pertains to the sun, I believe. He does that with a little bit of extraterrestrial help. Listen, I am not a regular science fiction reader, but I like stuff that is accessible and entertaining, and if it's set in space, I'm gonna need something that makes space feel a little less terrifying. And this book does that in pretty spectacular fashion. If you look too deeply, you'll realize that this book is a little bit cheesy at points, but I was able to overlook that because the plot is so propulsive that you just never really have time to sit there and be like, God damn, this is corny. I was just busy wondering if this nerd was gonna save the world. So if you wanna go piggy dipping in the piggy pond of science fiction, this is a pretty safe bet, especially if you're kind of a newbie to the genre. All right, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I read 7 of the 9 books before I decided I was going to do this video in the first place, right? This is one of the 2 that I hadn't read, and after having read it, sort of wish I hadn't picked it up in the first place. Hidden Pictures is the horror pick. Hidden Pictures is about Mallory, who presently loves Jesus and formerly loved drugs. He's out of rehab and has taken a job to look after a 5-year-old little boy. It's great until the boy starts getting possessed by demons and shit, making creepy drawings, and talking about his special friend, Anya. Immediately, I was intrigued. The writing style was really easy to get into, and when characters have real-life struggles and real-life trauma and backstory, I am always more interested in it, right? Mallory was a pretty intriguing character from the start. Unfortunately, once we start getting reveals in this book, shit goes extremely sideways extremely quickly. This book has a 4.15 rating on Goodreads, and the reviews from my Goodreads friends pretty favorable for this book. So when I finished and I felt a little bit of uneasiness, it took a little bit of digging to understand why I was feeling that way. I did eventually come across a couple of reviews that I think kind of helped me articulate what about this book I didn't particularly enjoy. Now, I won't spoil it for you because, you know, this is kind of like a horror mystery thriller type book, but it had some right-wing transphobic weirdness going on. And because of the way that this is executed, I do see some readers maybe ignoring the weirdness or believing it wasn't the author's intent for the book to be read a certain way. But in the context of our world and in the context of this book, I felt pretty fucking yikes after finishing it. Whatever the intention was, it felt like right-wing propaganda to me, and I just wasn't a big fan. All right, moving on to a very different kind of story with the cover that has sparked many a conversation about the appropriateness of using illustrated covers for romance novels. We have Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. What's most interesting to me about this book is actually not the cover, but the hype that this book has gotten in general. I don't think that this book is terrible. I don't feel like I've been gaslit every time I hear people gush about it, and I'm just secretly in the back thinking, what the fuck are people seeing in this that I'm not seeing? At the same time, I do sort of scratch my head because I don't understand the hype that this book gets, because to me it's just thoroughly okay. As a debut novel, I do have respect for it. I have respect for the success that this author has had. Honestly, very, very impressive. Aside from her, monetary success, I really appreciate what Hannah Grace has tried to do with the diverse cast of side characters, and the main characters having personalities and trauma and things they have been through. The execution for me of the romance itself was just not swoony enough to warrant the hype. Anyway, this book is about Anastasia and Nate, and the setup for the book, the premise of the book, is that she is an ice skater in university, and she ends up getting to a situation where she needs a new partner. She's a partner or pairs figure skater, and she enlists the help of one of the most successful hockey players on the hockey team, and they also kind of fall in love at the same time. At least that's kind of what the premise promises. So the story, I think, is hardly really about that at all, and is really mostly just smut and a lot of people talking. This is a book that's probably not going to change your life, but if you want to be part of the phenomenon, you want to understand why people bitch about the cover of this book, or you just want to be a part of the cultural zeitgeist, I guess pick it up. All right, let's talk about the World War I fan fiction, Living on Vibes Alone. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross is the most popular young adult book right now. We've got Iris and Kit, and they are big time rivals at this newspaper, competing for the same job. Little do they know, they're also pen pals, communicating via magical typewriter, their deepest wishes and darkest desires. Actually, not really that part, because it's YA, where the author insists that the characters need to get married before smanging, but they do in fact chat, and it's got flowery writing, and the world is actually not World War I. It is in fact this magical war between gods. And do we get any delightful world building to where we actually are invested in what happens in the plotline of this book? No, but it's YA, so vibes alone are sometimes enough. Not for me, but for other people. This is a book that I read and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me now, but if I were 15 and just craving human touch and connection, maybe I'd be about it. Something I am about, because I'm neurotic, is goal setting, habits, planning. I'm a slut for spreadsheets, what can I say? And Atomic Habits by James Clear, the nonfiction pick, was simultaneously helpful and incredibly validating. It is a no-nonsense approach to getting shit done and getting it done well. And I am far from being the most put together person out there. As I was listening to this book a couple of days ago, I was thinking to myself, wait, that's something I already do, about a couple of the tactics that he is talking about in this book. And at other points, I was thinking to myself, hey, I really should start doing that. I'm normally not someone who's into nonfiction in general, and I'm especially not into these sort of like life hacking nonfiction self-help books, but this really is one of the most practical books that I've ever read, and I don't really have anything snarky to say about it. If you have been wanting to get certain things done in your life and you feel like roadblocks just keep coming up, or you're making excuses for yourself, I feel like this book does a really good job at helping you kind of get out of those spirals and to get into actually getting goals accomplished, getting those habits taken care of. They're really informative little nuggets of information that I genuinely think could help anyone, and it's practical information that I think is presented in an unpretentious way. It's very much like, this is what has been proven by science, this is what has worked for other people anecdotally, this could work for you, and I think that pretty much everybody could gain something from this book, even if you, like me, are not necessarily the biggest of nonfiction fans. So those are the 9 most popular books of the Goodreads Reading Challenge so far this year. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these, if you agree with my thoughts and feelings and opinions. Like I mentioned, I will leave a link in the description to the list if you want to check it out for yourself, see if any of those books you'd like to add to your own TBR. But I hope this was helpful, and if it wasn't helpful, I hope it was entertaining. Thanks so much for watching. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!